It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio. The bearer of bad news today. The streak is over. Illinois loses at Michigan State because that's what happens. We lose at Michigan State. This has been my lot in life, our lot in life. But I say my lot in life to personalize it and be a whiny baby for a second because my wife being a Michigan State alum, that's one. Two, it seems like I'm always in the state of Michigan when this happens. We went to the last two games up there. That would have been when Terrence was back, not long after his suspension was reversed by the court order. And then we were there last year when KJ played all of, I think, 3 minutes. We can't win at Michigan State. Actually, we have a hard time beating Michigan State in general. And it's frustrating now that you add the new wrinkle that, right at the moment, Izzo is not cute and cuddly right now. Not with the Jeremy Fears thing, and we'll talk about that. But I'm going to get into that later because the story of the game, frustrations abound for sure with Jeremy Fears sticking his leg out for Mirkovic and Jeremy Fears still being a superstar player, which he was yesterday, and the biggest reason why Michigan State won. The question is, what's the biggest reason why Illinois lost? And yeah, the officiating frustrated me, but the key reason why Illinois lost, quite simply, they didn't make enough shots. And that's analysis. I know. It's like, wow, this is what you come to 200 level for, to find out that the reason Illinois lost the game was that they just simply didn't make enough shots. Okay. But I say that because what that entailed was a fast break game for Michigan State that they wanted to play. You miss shots, you open yourselves up to that. And Illinois has not faced a team this year, with the exception of maybe Alabama way back in November, where you had to worry about the opposing team and their pace of play really affecting you. So what happened last night? 22 fast break points to 0. You lost by 3. Yes, you got out rebounded by 10. Yes, your superstar went 2 for 16 from the field. These are all bigger reasons why Illinois lost the game. And yet it's weird to be sitting here on the Sunday thinking, actually, I am more encouraged by this team after that game. And here's what I mean by that. You got this long season. It is a process. There are valleys and there are peaks. And this team has been on one big extended peak for almost 2 months worth of time. Even though that was a loss last night, I ultimately leave that game feeling better about their long-term chances. That's not to say I wasn't pissed off after the game. I asked my dad what kind of language I was using in our text thread. I was being the little angry elf that I used to be back in the day. I know that's a tag usually reserved for Tom Izzo. I'm got a few inches on him, I think. But I left that game, and especially after sleeping on it and being a little bit more reasonable about it in the morning, thinking, okay, this Illinois team and guys like a Jake Davis and a Benham Rickhouse, but more specifically a Mirkovic and Stojakovic, are really defining their roles in such a way that when Kylan does come back, which should be sooner rather than later, you feel as if you kind of got all your 8 pieces in place. And it is weird for me to say that right now, the two guys that I'm perhaps, if not most concerned about, a little bit annoyed with, are the Ivasic brothers. They've had worse games, but you keep waiting for the two of them to kick into high gear. And the thing is, I think they very well might, but you're seeing everybody else kick into high gear to such a degree where you were able to withstand, for the most part, and almost get a W with a bad Keaton Wagler game. He is, in fact, human. He is not infallible. I thought he was going to be the difference why Illinois would win the game. He was actually a big reason why Illinois lost. But do I leave that game feeling as if, all of a sudden we're in trouble or less than the team that we went in as to Breslin Center? Not at all. I actually leave heartened with the fact that you were able to do this despite struggling with your bread and butter, with the offense, and that Michigan State got a superstar performance from a guy that we wish they would not have gotten a superstar performance from. Let's call it what it is. So all that to say, it sucks. I hate losing to Michigan State. I don't like them anymore. I don't. And maybe I'm late to the game. I always kind of respected a lot of what they did, and I still, for the most part, do. They are not, in my mind, some sort of nefarious program, but I think that was an opportunity missed for Tom Izzo, and we'll talk about that. But and I think what it also showed is that, listen, at the end of the day, guys, this is where I appreciate honesty from coaches. It's about winning games. And if I were to say one thing about Brad Underwood, he's someone that does have a lot of hyperbole and things like that. I don't think Brad Underwood has ever once presented himself as some sort of leader of men type in the way that a Coach K had back in the day, or in a way that Tom Izzo occasionally will still do, as the sort of, father figure of Big Ten coaches, or for that matter, college basketball in general. Brad Underwood is not presenting himself as that. Brad Underwood knows what it's about, winning games. So for that, I appreciate him, that he doesn't add this sort of flowery language as to, well, I'm trying to make my guys better men. I don't give a shit about that. Not really. Do you? No, I don't want them to be jerks, but we're watching for them to win the games. Had that been the baseline for what one would expect from Tom Izzo, the whole Fears thing would be a little bit more understandable. So that is salt in the wound. Jeremy Fears was spectacular. And there were a lot more smart plays than there were dirty ones. The guy is a cagey son of a gun, and it can frustrate the heck out of you. He's a foul baiter. It's not his fault the refs continue to call it. They continue to do it. So all that said, despite Illinois' flaws and despite their imperfections yesterday, I leave that game feeling better. What you have now is a 2-game stretch coming up at home where it won't be easy, but I got to think that as a possible reset for this team, it could be much worse than what happened last night. So this is going to be a little bit more of an abbreviated podcast. It's Super Bowl Sunday. It's not as much fun to talk about losses as they are wins, that's for sure. So with everybody having things to do, I did want to get a quick podcast out there to react to this Michigan State loss and look ahead to the week. But before I get too far ahead of myself, got to remind you the 200 level is brought to you by Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. Steaks, seafood, and spirits right in the heart of downtown Champaign. It's great for formal or informal dinners alike, date night, pregame meal, postgame meal. Nicest dining room in town. Service is second to none, and everything in their kitchen is made from scratch. It is a scratch kitchen, all the way down to the ketchup that you get with their delicious steak fries. It is the best bang for your buck and the best dining experience in Champaign-Urbana. That is Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he could be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728 and join their maintenance program. No overtime or weekend fees, guaranteed same-day service. We're about to schedule our AC check for the spring, which is part of that maintenance package. 217-841-4728. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. And finally, Owen Builders LLC. I'm on at owenbuildersllc.com for your next home improvement project. Check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. Appreciate them and appreciate you, the listener, the viewer. And as I said, an abbreviated podcast because it's not as much fun to talk about losses, but I do have in the comments section one thing that I wanted to pull up real quick here from Aaron. And he says this: the most frustrating part is losing to Izzo and it being a vindicating moment for him. I think he's appalled by his post-game comments about the trip on purpose. He condones that kind of play. Izzo has taken over as most dislikable figure in college basketball. This is my conundrum, Aaron. My wife being a Michigan State fan, and I have no poker face. I even, not even jokingly said, I think it was Wednesday night or was it Thursday night? Wednesday night when Illinois beat Northwestern, but right before that, Michigan State lost to Minnesota. And a lot of people, and you guys were right in this regard, thought, we're going to get Michigan State's best shot. I thought that we would, but it wouldn't be enough. It was enough. And it did take Illinois not shooting well and all that. But regardless, to Aaron's point, Tom Izzo to me is not the most dislikable figure in college basketball. That could be a long list that you make there. I think Mick Cronin is just an absolutely miserable prick. I don't understand why he's doing what he's doing when he hates his job and he hates living in Los Angeles and being the coach of UCLA freaking basketball as much as he does. That is a miserable individual. So I would put him far ahead of a Tom Izzo. But I think what Aaron and his point are maybe getting to here is that with a Mick Cronin, there isn't any sort of cognitive dissonance. He is what he is. Tom Izzo over the years has cultivated this personality. And I saw it firsthand when me and my wife met him at that coaches versus cancer thing. So I know why people can be so enamored with him, because we were when we met him too. The guy's a legend. You see him, you're like, I've been watching you my whole life. He took his time to speak with us. I don't think he's an evil guy, but I think that he wants to win first and foremost. And that is where some of the comments, specifically after the Minnesota game, in this, well, I'm going to look at the tape, maybe I'll have to bench him, not start him. Well, sure enough, he was starting. And sure enough, he played 43 out of 45 minutes. What I would prefer Izzo say is, listen, in the game of basketball, things happen. That's our point guard. Just brush right over it. Don't give any sanctimonious talk. And it's the kind of thing where I'm already thinking, oh, God, I'm going to have some uncomfortable conversations with my wife here as we get into March. And I'm like, babe, I'm sorry. I can't root for Michigan State. One, you hired Pat Fitzgerald. That's a no-go, okay? I cannot reconcile that. Two, Tom Izzo is starting to he's losing me a little bit. He's losing me. And the guy has a track record as such where you can't question his ability as a coach. You can't. The guy is one of the most accomplished coaches in college basketball history. But it's so frustrating when you're on the losing end of that, and it seems like you're feeding into, kind of like Aaron was talking about, this vindication for Izzo, when bullshit. What a vindication. He has a player tripping people and occasionally kicking others in the balls. So they get to be vindicated? Here's what I did last night. I'm at my in-laws. I was quietly, peacefully watching the game. I'm working on a new book. It's not a sports book, but I'm working on a book. I got the game over here. And I noticed that when I'm doing something else while watching the game, I'm finding that perfect bridge where I don't get too angry or too up or down. I'm trying to be more zen, which it's a work in progress. And it took me all the way until overtime when Tommy fouled out on just a phantom foul call, and Jeremy Fears was doing his foul baiting thing. And I'm in the kitchen, and they're in the other room watching it, and I'd been silent, and I just say, God damn it, like that. Oh, sorry, in-laws. And they're probably thinking, what is wrong with this guy? But I'm sick of losing to Tom Izzo, Michigan State. But it is compounded, Aaron, by the fact that you did have this sort of week-long stretch of Jeremy Fears being a doofus. And he was, at one point yesterday, with the trip on Mirkovic, which was intentional, but was not called as such. And I leave that game frustrated on 2 points. Well, Jeremy Fears is going to be what he is, okay? He's a little punk. That's fine. There have been punks many, many times in college basketball. Wisconsin had Brad Davison, and Duke had Grayson Allen, and Michigan State has Jeremy Fears. You can keep him, boys, because he ain't going to the NBA. Not like his brother. Anywho, the two things I'm most frustrated with are Tom Izzo, because he is a respected and well-regarded coach. And what he just showed in the last week is it's only about winning. And I think we all knew that. I mean, fine. But just don't beat around the bush and don't do that, gee, shucks thing as the, coach emeritus of college basketball. Here's the other thing I'm frustrated with. How, after the last week, does Jeremy Fears get the benefit of the doubt with calls? Specifically, the trip that was not called intentional. Give me a break. And then also, Tommy getting fouled out when he didn't even touch him. This foul baiting stuff, the foul hunting that you see from like an SGA and NBA, I can respect the gamesmanship, but I don't enjoy it. It is not aesthetically pleasing. And I'm not going to be rooting for that kind of player or team because it is just like pulling your teeth. It's like if I were a soccer fan and I know that there's a team out there that part of their style is basically just flopping and being little babies whenever a feather touches them to slow the pace of play or whatever it may be. Gamesmanship is that. Illinois football does that, or has, with the whole defensive substitution thing. A little less so with defensive injuries. I remember when Michigan State came in here with Mel Tucker and how frustrating that was. Gamesmanship is one thing, but what Jeremy Fears has kind of ventured into is dirty play. And for the officials to reward that by continuing to put him at the line and calling a foul anytime someone breathed on him. Now, Keaton got the benefit of some as well, but Keaton did not get, I think, as much of a benefit as Jeremy Fears did. And it just goes to show this human element, which is officiating. I know it's part of the game. And for those that have listened to this podcast or watched it for a long time, I do not call that stuff out much. What are you going to do about it? The answer is nothing. I very rarely get into officiating, except when they just annoy me and games go too long. Yeah, I do always complain when they review something that doesn't need to be reviewed. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it's 10:04 and I want to go to bed, but for the most part, I don't blame outcomes of games on this. And it was a tertiary part of yesterday. I still think Illinois had more hand in losing that game than the refs did for losing it for Illinois. Okay. By a decent margin, even, because Illinois did not play like the number 5 team they had been. They had flashes of that, and they were this close, the razor's edge of escaping with that victory, despite playing a B- game by their standards. But it is frustrating. You will probably not see Michigan State again unless it's in the Big Ten tournament. And I guess there's a chance if you're the 2 and they're the 3 that you would see each other fairly early. But I guess that is a long-winded way in which to say I'm tired of losing to them. I'm tired. And I'm not angry at Brad or any of that. This I don't think was any question about coaching, in-game, the plan that they had going in. It was just a high-level game. And they made a few more plays than you did. It's a tough pill to swallow. It would have been against anybody, but as I'm sitting there in Michigan, away from home, seeing my team lose to Michigan freaking State again, yes, I am annoyed. And I was peeved, and it took me a while to cool off before I went to bed. And then I woke up, and life goes on. Ho-hum. And I still feel good about this Illinois team. Now, what we're going to talk about the most of today in this podcast is the bright spots from yesterday. Specifically, Mirkovic, Stojakovic, Jake Davis, Stone Cold Killer, guys finding their role in time for when Colin Boswell comes back. I got a few more comments here. This is from Andrew. Evergreen rant from me. I just hate the way Izzo point guards play. Other team makes a bucket, and within 3 seconds, they sprint up the court, drive down the lane, and throw the ball at the rim and get foul called. Yeah, Andrew. I mean, Cassius wants... Dude, you can go back to Mateen Cleaves. Come on. It's been there from the start, and he's had a model with which he's gotten these point guards that are undersized, but they are quick in transition. I'm trying to think why Cassius Winston did not bother me nearly as much as Jeremy Fears. Because would he have been doing some of the same stuff? I don't know. And I don't even mean, by the way, just take aside the trippings and the kickings, okay? The style of play. I know Cassius Winston did that little windy, dipsy-do thing around screens and worked in and out of the lane, and, this is where Colin Boswell would have helped. I think you win that game with Kylan last night, and that's what it is. Michigan State had their own injuries to deal with, and I thought when Divine Ugochukwu, his first name's Divine, his last name starts with U, but he's their backup point guard, and he's pretty good. When they announced he was out for the year with a foot injury, I thought, well, this is good news for Illinois. That right there is worth maybe a possession or two. That Fears is going to have to play all game, and will he be able to shoulder the load? Well, he did. 25 points, 12 assists. That's ridiculous. All right, let's see what else here from Aaron. Sparty's quickness to the ball really hurt the Illini. A major weakness for the Illini is they are slow-footed. Aaron, I thought this on my run today. What am I going to be looking for when March Madness is unveiled? And what I'm going to be looking for in Illinois' bracket is avoiding teams with a super fast pace of play. Only because I think that can be potentially a landmine for Illinois. Not always, okay? Michigan State being at home and playing with just a lot of desperation yesterday, that was a bad mix, right? I think Illinois can beat teams with fast paces of play, but I don't necessarily know if you get a team that can couple that with three-point shooting, which somehow Michigan State did it without that great of three-point shooting, apart from Kohler and Tang last night, if that would really bode well for Illinois. Now, coming up, let's take, for example, Wisconsin. And they right now, as far as pace of play, adjusted tempo, they are 82 compared to your 271. What's so weird about that, though? I say pace of play, and I'm looking at Michigan State, and their tempo is 266 on KenPom. So it really is feast or famine with them, where it's either they're getting out in transition or they are running a full 30 seconds worth of offense. So perhaps that's not a great barometer. I think you'd have to get down into the actual stats and find out which teams have the most highest percentage of fast break points, which teams do like to push it. With a team like Illinois, the lack of transition defense has not really hurt him so far this year, but it did yesterday, and that would be a template that some teams would be able to use. All right, this is from M. Bratz 2330. It was a phantom call on Tommy, but it was the Fears acting that the ref bought. Frustrating, to be sure. Yeah. They don't need to call that. I'm not going to blame Fears for that. I mean, that ain't dirty. That as Keaton Wagler was doing that all game and has done that all year to a very high level and did not get those calls yesterday. Jeremy Fears, if he's going to keep getting those calls, he's going to keep doing it. These officials need to stop anticipating the foul and actually call fouls when they happen. But wake me up whenever that happens, because I don't think that's necessarily going to change. And from Aaron as well. Fears is so good, too. He doesn't need to do the extra stuff. You know, I was listening to Jeremy and the Illini Inquirer podcast, and he said the very same thing. And it's true. I don't think I'd like the guy anyway, because that style of play, if you're the opponent, it's frustrating, but that it's still respectable in that it's within the bounds of play, and he's really, really good at that. Now, here's the thing. With all those frustrations, and God knows you felt it just like I did last night. You know, we wanted to go 21-3. We wanted to get another quad 1A win in there and get that much closer to a 1 seed, which is still within reach. And let's be real, it's all about the Michigan game. You know, you do what you got to do, and Michigan does what they have to do. It'll come down to that game. You were still within a game of them, and that's where you would need to be when it comes to that last Friday in February. But there were some major positives last night, and we got to start with Mirkovic. I've liked him from the start. There was a little dip, if you want to call it that, in December, but really for the last couple months here, last month and a half, Mirkovic has really found consistency. And what we saw last night that is so encouraging to me is that you had this sort of frantic play. It looks crazy, for example, when he's playing point and he decides he's going to go. And he's doing these acrobatic moves, left, right, weaving around. He had some layups yesterday that were just mind-boggling. And you're thinking, how is he not just going to throw this right off the rim and it bounces 20 feet backwards? And yet, as out of control as it looks, it's fairly in control. And we're seeing more and more of that where the game is seeming to slow down for him. He is such a weapon for this team. And I already liked his effort. At first, I didn't really, he's an actor, you know, and this is college basketball. He's kind of our own guy. He would drive other people nuts, but he can act a little bit. He embellishes contact. But now that I think about it, you know, this is a very, I think, thoughtful basketball player. He is constantly kind of analyzing what is my next move offensively. He has a nose for the ball. He has a nose for rebounds. He was in that, you know, tip ball situation where finally Jake Davis got it and got fouled. We'll get to Jake here in a minute. But Mirkovic has just been a revelation, I think, in the last couple of games specifically. You knew what was there. You did, because we've seen it on and off. But for that to be the performance he had last night when Keaton was not himself, I think it adds an extra layer of security from a fan's perspective watching this team thinking, okay, if your alpha dog is not at his best, you will have a guy like Mirkovic that can shoulder some of that point guard load, and even more when Boswell comes back. So I think that you're going to see this offense continue to exploit that. There's not many 6'8" guys that can do what Mirkovic can do. You know, you're looking at a roster right now where it's probably either him or Mraz Johnson. And y'all know how much I loved Mraz Johnson and how painful it is even now to watch him play. And yet I'm thinking, okay, it probably could have worked. You would have found a way if Mraz would have stayed to still get a guy like Mirkovic, I would imagine. Maybe, maybe not. Who would you rather have right now? And I know that's such an apples and oranges comparison because they are vastly different players. There are very few similarities between the two of them. I think that if you get Mirkovic this year or next year, that was a trade worth making because Mraz is starting to show up on draft boards. As it stands right now, though, with this team on February 8th, as I'm recording this, Mirkovic is fast becoming, if he has not already become, the number 2 option on this team. And that's okay. I feel good about that. The versatility he has offensively makes him an incredibly tough matchup. And he stresses out whatever defender's on him. You put a shorter guy on him, he'll shoot the damn three, or he'll shoot the layup right over you. You put a bigger guy on him, you have to guard that sneaky quickness that he has. The ball handling for someone that size, extremely rare. It is very exciting to see a player start to click in a way that we weren't seeing in November when he was asked to play much more down low or pop out for the three, right? But this team seems to be finding a new gear offensively with him. And if they would have just hit a few more shots yesterday, I mean, they had a terrible three-point percentage. 10 for 36, I think. And he was setting guys up. If they make a couple more of those, the offense, which is still the number one offense in KenPom, would have crept up even more so, thanks to him. Mirkovic, extremely exciting. You now have a couple of lead guys that can play off each other, and you're going to see him, Wagler, kind of trade the back and forth point guard duties. Going to be especially helpful when Boswell comes back. And you don't need to play through him right away. His job when he comes back will be defense. And what that does mean, I'm going to get to Stojakovic in a bit. What that does mean is that Jake Davis is probably going to resume his role as a bench player. And it's unfortunate, but it's okay. Do you guys have any worries that Jake Davis is going to all of a sudden go back into a shell because he's a bench player? The guy is a gamer. And what I'm loving about Jake Davis is you can sometimes see the confidence blossom right in front of you. It's not as if Jake Davis ever lacked that, but eventually you need reps and you need playing time to take that next step. And you're seeing that with this opportunity. I would not go so far as to say, oh, this team will ultimately be better for Colin Boswell's injury, because that will depend on if Colin can get back to his 100% self. And I don't know if that's going to be possible. But one benefit of this is a guy like Jake Davis getting that extra time in order for him to develop into the player he's become. One that I feel very comfortable with on the court and feel like not only is he going to make big shots, but for him to go to the line and make those 2 free throws to send it into overtime speaks volumes of his mental fortitude. And I'm noticing a pattern here. I know Keaton had an off night, but don't worry about him. David Mirkovic, mentally tough. I'm looking at Jake Davis, mentally tough. I'm looking at Benham Rickhouse, who, great first half, still looked good out there throughout. I know that there was the block out on the ball that eventually got to Kurtang for the go-ahead 3 in regulation. Michigan State will fluster you with rebounding. They were our match. They bettered us on the boards, which is, again, is a huge reason why you lost. But I think Benham Rickhouse is another example of, in the right role, is more confident. In a way, him and Jake Davis are sort of the yin and yang of this coin here, because, or the two opposite sides of the coin, I should say, to mix up cliches, because Jake Davis probably required that extra time on the court to grow into the player he's becoming right now. Meanwhile, Benham Rickhouse needed a less substantial role in order for him to find his role. But what's most encouraging is that that's exactly what's going on right now. That whether it's Jake Davis or Benham Rickhouse on the court, I feel super comfortable with either one. Now, last night, sneaky story, I think, is Andrej Stojakovic. I say sneaky. The guy had 17 points. He looked like Andrej Stojakovic. And on top of that, a great rebounder. He was actually skying up there and getting some crucial rebounds in that game. But the fact that you had him against a team like Michigan State able to attack the rim and look like the guy you thought he would be coming in, massive. I just look at all this and I'm thinking, okay, I know the Ivasic brothers are not playing at their best right now, but I think they can figure it out. And God dang, man, this team, I'm more bullish on this team after yesterday than I was going in. You were going to lose again. You were going to lose another game or two or 3. I don't know if you're going to lose much more than that. And there are tough things coming up, including this week stretch against Wisconsin and Indiana at home. Those are going to be games where there's going to be moments where you're thinking, oh boy, oh boy. But I think there is something advantageous to losing this game at the time in which you lost it. It's the first weekend in February. You got a tough loss at home in overtime. And a tough loss on the road in overtime. That does not hurt you in any way, shape, or form when it comes to seedings in the NCAA tournament. It does not hurt your perception. If anything, it can be a galvanizing moment for this team. Similar to the Nebraska game, where you knew that if you would have just played a little bit better, you win that game. This is not all that far from that. A vastly different effort, to be sure, because Illinois, the effort was not in question yesterday. They came ready to play. Michigan State just brought their best game probably since December. But I do think that this team and the mental toughness they're showing gives me a lot of confidence that the response to this game is going to be another streak. It's this simple. You got 2 home games, Wisconsin, Indiana. You go on the road to California, USC, UCLA, or the order, whether it's that or you flip it. Michigan at home. Can this team win the 4 games coming up to ensure that that Michigan game might be for a share of the Big Ten title? As I sit here, I have a lot of confidence that they do win these next 4 games. And there are going to be tense moments. This is not going to be easy, especially when you go out west and you know that, yeah, Mick Cronin might be annoying as can be, but the guy is a decent coach. And UCLA's got dudes. USC, Eric Musselman, good coach. They got dudes. But are they as smart as this Illinois team? Are they as disciplined as this Illinois team? Are they as deep as this Illinois team? I think the answer to those questions, it's all no. Ken Pom thinks you're going to win the next 4. And it's pretty predictive because it did have Michigan State as the last remaining loss in Illinois' regular season. Just to make sure I got this accurate here, they have Illinois winning out with the exception of a 1-point loss to Michigan. Michigan improved their Ken Pom again today with they dominated Ohio State. They are extremely good. But they have Illinois beating Wisconsin at home by 13, 85-72. They have Illinois beating Indiana 82-70. They have a 9-point win at USC next Wednesday, and they have a 6-point win against UCLA next Saturday. They aren't going to be easy. But I do think this team wins the next 4 ahead of that Michigan game. Now, if they don't, do we have problems? Like, what are our standards here? Do we need perfection? I don't know if that would be fair, but I do think that expectations have changed. I think this team is welcoming those. I think yesterday only emboldens those high expectations, and I hope it would for them. Yeah, I think you got to win the next 4. If you drop one of them, that means that you got outplayed by a lesser team. They're all lesser teams than you by a considerable margin. And if you are who you think you are, who Brad Underwood and that staff thinks they are, who that team themselves think they are, who we, the fans, think they are, you win those. I think the toughest of the bunch is going to be at USC. You can just smell it a mile away, can't you? A Wednesday late night at USC. I'm going to probably withhold podcasting because I can watch a game and shut it off and go to bed not that long after. But if I'm podcasting while watching, then it'll be a while. So it's a 9 p.m. start next Wednesday. I'm just going to wait until the next day to do a podcast. But no, you got to win these. And I think what that would show is the continued growth of Brad Underwood as a coach, this coaching staff being able to avoid those potholes. These are 4 games in a row where there are possible potholes in any one of them, right? So there are no surprises. There's no team that's going to jump up and get you unexpectedly here. You know what they are. These are all tournament caliber teams that you're about to face. But they're all teams that would be on the 8, 9, or 10 line. So the fact that I think the 2 toughest ones are at home. Let me see. Let me make this argument to you, okay? If you were to flip the home and away here and play Wisconsin, Indiana on the road and USC, UCLA at home, you flip those, I do worry more about a loss at Wisconsin or Indiana than I do a loss out west. That team is probably going to head out west on Monday and get a couple days out in California, I would imagine. Get acclimated, whatever. And then when you go to UCLA, you're still in the same city. So hopefully by then there's no adjustment really needed. But yeah, this is a big stretch. I think that you win the next 4, you're exactly where you thought you would be as you went into the Michigan State game. This is a hiccup, and it stinks to lose that game because you were this close to winning it, and this close to staying pace with Michigan and being able to afford a loss in these next 4. But what I do think this does is hit the reset button just enough where you will be laser focused for these next 4 games and get it done. All right. Before I get out of here, here's the plan for this week. And as I said, this is going to be a little bit shorter of a podcast. It's Super Bowl Sunday. People are, they're doing their thing, and that's fine. So what we're going to do this week is Wisconsin. That is Tuesday. I'm thinking I'd do a podcast Wednesday because Indiana's not until Sunday. That's what we'll probably do. So I know there's the live second half reactions. I don't know. Let me put it this way. If we do a live second half on Tuesday, you'll see it on YouTube, Twitter, all that. It'll happen. Or if it doesn't, we'll be back here Wednesday. That will be kind of a spur of the moment decision. I feel like I am a little bit better at reacting after the fact. And that's probably just universal. So Sunday, plan on doing a second half for Indiana. That's an early game. So that'd be about 1 o'clock for the second half. Next week, the West Coast swing, USC. We would have a reaction to that Thursday, February 19th. And then UCLA is that Saturday night. Got to decide if we'd want to react then and there or the following day. I will say this about this week, though. For Wednesday's podcast, we will likely have a defensive coordinator to talk about as well. So that's another reason to wait for that game to get played and then react afterwards. But hey, I hate losing Michigan State. God dang it. I really do. And I don't like them anymore. I don't. And I got to break it to my wife that I'm not, for your happiness, I won't root against them, but I just can't root for them right now. Sorry, babe. She knows that about Pat Fitzgerald. She doesn't like Pat Fitzgerald either and wonders why they hired at the home of Larry Nassar, why you would hire a guy that allowed a bunch of weird sexual car washy kind of things to happen with this football program. But hey, Michigan State, you do you. That's fine. But yeah, I feel good about this team. And I think they continue to figure things out. And last night was a perfect storm in some ways of everything that they've been excelling at kind of abruptly paused or was just off enough to make a difference. And Michigan State's good enough to take advantage. That's a Michigan State team that right now is a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. So that's a 2-3 game that you would get in the Sweet 16. Okay, imagine if you would play that game in a neutral site. Who's winning? This team is right where you want them to be. They are a 2 seed through and through with an opportunity in these next 4 games leading into Michigan to potentially play their way into a 1. Win the next 4. Not easy. I can't say easy peasy because it ain't going to be easy, but I think they are good enough to do just that. But we'll be here the entire way. Appreciate you guys tuning in for this, again, abbreviated podcast by our standards. But before I get out of here, got to remind you to support our sponsors, which includes Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits for a date night. I think Valentine's Day coming up, right? Date night, informal, formal, pregame, postgame meal. Stop by at Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728 and join their maintenance program. No overtime or weekend fees and guaranteed same-day service. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. And finally, Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. For your next home improvement project, check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. Thank you all for tuning in for this impromptu podcast. Wish I had better news, but this team will be all right. We will live to fight another day. Onward and upward we go with 4 big games ahead to secure what would be a huge game against Michigan the last Friday of February. It's going to get here before you know it. But in the meantime, enjoy the ride. We will see you later this week. It is the 200 level.